So, welcome back to the PI Planning Cooking Show. Now we're going to talk about the IP iteration.
Welcome to the PI Planning Cooking Show with Shane Harrison.
I'm thinking of clouds and rain and thunderstorms. It's not that bad, but it is a pretty tough time. And generally speaking, if it's going to be successful, it actually needs to be tough. What we're looking for in the IP iteration, amongst all those other wonderful things like learning and a good plan, is we're looking to change this perspective of the teams. We want to re-energize them by getting them to look another way. Look over here. What I used to do when I was young, 1820s, living in New Zealand, is I would actually go sailing. Why? Because that would make me focus on something else, focus on something different, something that I loved. And so let's remember that needs to happen during the IP iteration, because one of the reasons the IP iteration is there, and this is very important, is for the teams to have a little bit of a reset. Because they've been working really hard in the last couple of iterations coming up to the IP iteration, they can be very heavy. Even with a good plan, the world will interfere with the best plan and it will create extra stress as you go towards the end. I know you all work very hard to minimize that, but it happens anyway. If anyone has some tips to make sure that never happens, let me know. I would love to learn from you. In fact, I'd love to learn anything that you want to share. So one of the things that I do to make my IP iteration easier, in fact, to make all my iterations easier, I start my iterations on a Wednesday. I've talked about this before. Why do I do that? In a lot of countries, the public holidays are which days? Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday? No, they're Monday and Friday. So if we want to avoid clashing with the public holidays for our iteration stop and start, we have our iteration stop and start at a point that is away from those holidays. Even more important to me personally is if people need to have a break, they need to have a long weekend. I live in, and Raphael live in Switzerland, so occasionally we need a weekend away, and my wife loves a place called Como, which is just down the road on the train. But what are we going to do? We're going to take a Friday off or a Monday off. So what do? You put your stop and your start on a Tuesday and Wednesday. You stop on a Tuesday, you start on a Wednesday. There is another benefit to this that is really, it's not the easiest one in terms to sell, because there are the other benefits of holidays and stuff like that, is if you look at people's body clocks, at their energy levels, the last thing you want to do is end an iteration on a Friday, because which day of the week is the energy the lowest? It's a Friday. So let's say we're trying to do a demo. Are we going to get more positive discussions on a Friday, or are we going to get more positive discussions on a Tuesday? If we're doing a retro, are we going to have more positive discussions on a Friday afternoon, when frankly all I'm thinking about is, what do I have to finish off today before I can leave? So we're going to have more positive and creative discussions on a Tuesday. Where is our planning going to be better? So maybe you're going to end your iteration on a Thursday, start on a Friday. Is your planning going to be better on Friday morning or Tuesday morning or Wednesday morning? It's easy. So one of the things I do is I structure the iterations that way. 2 weeks or 3 weeks, my preference still remains quite firmly 2, but you need to do what you need to do to be successful. And let's go back to the IP iteration. What I also tend to do, and this is from experience from others, something I learned from working with some other SPCs and SPC candidates, is I will lift the inspect and adapt, I will move it straight to the front of the IP iteration. Why do you do that? Well, one of the things that comes out of inspect and adapt is change, because we've identified some problems, we've done root cause analysis, we've done some hypothesis about what we want to do differently. Now those could be differences in ways of working that need to go to the communities or be communicated to all the teams. This could be structural changes in how you define a feature. This could be more work going into the IP iteration because you're going to make some changes to your architecture of your app itself or architecture of the platform that you're working on. if you're having that conversation, getting those results the day before PI planning, I don't know about you, but an afternoon or less to actually absorb, distill, and basically represent those results in a way that is consumable and executable for a team in PI planning, good luck. Most of the time when I see inspect and adapts happening before or just before PI planning, the results either don't get absorbed, so they get skipped until the next one. So we learned it yesterday, why are we not fixing it today? We learned it yesterday, and even better, we set a priority that this is urgent, but we're going to wait 3 months. No sense in that one. So they either don't go in, or they go in badly when they haven't been fully socialized, fully developed, fully analyzed. You haven't thought of all the relevant connotations like you would any other feature. So I move that inspect and adapt right to the front. Not often the Wednesday, so the day immediately afterwards, because things slip, right? But I will move it to the Thursday and the Friday. If your teams have really high predictability, yes, I'd move it to the Wednesday. So you have your inspect and adapt in whichever form you want. You should definitely, for the first 3 PIs, run the standard safe one out of the box. You will get enormous value from that. But once you've done your first 3, possibly 2, depending how good you are, you're going to find following a standard format will work against you, not for you, because the teams will get bored with that structure. So then start to mix it up. Try different approaches, maybe have focused ones, but we're not going to talk about that too much here. But what I want to encourage you to do is once you see the habitual elements starting to come into your inspect and adapts, mix them up. Inspect and adapt is a program retro. I, just off of my top of the head, can probably think of 20 different ways to do a retro. Why don't you guys try to come up with 20 different ways to solve the problems that inspect and adapt is there to do? Come up with 20 different ways to do an inspect and adapt. So, inspect and adapt moved up to the front. IP iteration starts on the Wednesday. Now, the last episode we talked about one of my other true loves other than socialization, which is communities of practice or guilds or capability organizations or whatever you want to call them. They are your organization's skills. They are the fundamental thing that make it possible for your organization to execute and create value and to grow and get stronger. They need time in your IP iteration. Make sure you reserve time for them in their IP iteration. They have leadership in those organizations. They know the things that they want to chase. They know how to get better. Trust them, give them time. 1 day, 2 days, allow all the developers to get together and work on, let's say you're doing C# and you use Clockwork. Maybe they want to have a look at, okay, some of the rules in Clockwork aren't relevant for what we're doing, actually, and there's some rules missing, so give them some time to work on those things and develop it. So it's still adding value, but it is something different from their day-to-day work. So you're still getting a re-energization element coming on. You're allowed some time, 1 or 2 days for your communities of practice. You can do like regional conferences or local conferences. This is wonderful. You can go across arts. Like if you've got multi-art environment, whether it's a solution or not, you can go across the arts and share knowledge. For anybody who wants to wonder why that is a purely wonderful thing, there is an excellent video online called Where Do Good Ideas Come From? It's got wonderful little turtles. It's really, really cool. It really shows that innovation comes from mixing of ideas. So that's why we want people to mix up. Education is critical, so you want to reserve time for that. And of course you've got PI planning, but one other thing that two other things actually that you need to make sure you leave time for. One of them is the day before PI planning should be reserved to make sure the teams are ready for PI planning, whatever that means to them. I would expect, and maybe I haven't talked about it before, but I am now, I would expect an RTE will be running a backlog of everything that needs to be closed out before PI planning. I would expect a Scrum Master is going to be running a backlog or a list as well, whatever you want to call it. Probably even a product manager. It's critical those things are closed out, and that day is for this. And if the team have nothing to do, wonderful, you've done a fantastic job socialization. They can do innovation. They can do some creative stuff. They can do some fixing if they want. People want to do work. Every time I've seen this, no one wants to sit around and stare at an empty coffee cup. So give them the chance to do that. Some education, some peer work, stuff like that. They will use that time. And to be honest, a lot of the time they'll use it to make sure that they're ready for planning. The other thing you have to allow for, and this is really important, the time between the end of planning and the start of the first iteration. Let's say you're an art with 7 teams, and let's say each team has 10 stories per iteration. So you've got 7 teams with 5 iterations with 10 stories per iteration. So that's 70 stories that need to be uploaded per team into whatever tool that you're using. So you need some time from the time for that activity to get that up there between the end of your planning and the start of your first iteration. And of course, when you're exiting PI planning, are those stories, those 10 stories for that first iteration, are they fully fleshed out? Do they have all the details necessary to plan? Well, 9 times out of 10, no, they don't. So make sure I recommend you leave 2 days between the end of planning and the start of the next iteration to absorb those things. You can put other things in that time as well. You can do hackathons, but please make sure you don't put excessive pressure on your teams to go to hackathons. I have worked with clients and the teams are going, oh, there's too much to do in the IP iteration. Everything more or less except your inspect and adapt and your planning is more or less optional with good cause. If you're abandoning your community stuff, you will get a frown from me, but if you have a good reason, that's okay. But you're not supposed to kill yourself during your IP iteration. If anything, you want to relax. Try to find some time for iteration. Try to find some time for hackathons. But really, arrange that IP iteration so you get the result that you need. So that's it. Little guide on how to rearrange your IP iteration. We're now going to start digging in to each of those things in the IP iteration. A little bit of guidance, some very similar to what you'll find on the SAFE website, which has excellent guidance on all of these topics, and some very similar and some very different. So just things that I've learned from other people and things I've learned from my experiences. So we'll go into that going forward, and then once we get to it, we'll go day by day, step by step through PI planning. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the PI Planning Cooking Show, that we've sort of rustled up something nice. I'm running out of cooking analogies, so put some of those in the comments would be helpful. Thank you again for coming to the PI Planning Cooking Show. We hope you have a great week with lots of fun, lots of joy, lots of success. See you next time on the PI Planning Cooking Show, or he hasn't mentioned San Diego. What's wrong? Is this after San Diego? No, it's not. Still before San Diego. We are still looking for you to tell us what questions you want answered and who you want to answer them. Put those in the questions below, email us. Have a great week, lots of fun. For now, ciao.
That's the PI Planning Cooking Show with Shane Harrison.